you're likely to start. Some people hyperventilate. There are lots of variables there.
So again, in terms of that respiration rate, you would expect it to increase well beyond the normal rate?
Yes, I would not expect it to slow down.
Okay. In terms of the placement of the knee and the neck, could you determine based on your review whether it appeared his airway was obstructed?
Yes, the placement of the knee is towards the back and the back right side of Mr. Floyd's neck, and the airway is around the front. It is nowhere close to his airway.
We were talking about having an open airway. How does that affect your ability to speak?
The ability to speak or make any other sound, groaning, and Mr. Floyd did groan. So any of the sounds that Mr. Floyd is making requires you to be able to take air in over the vocal cords and out over the vocal cords. And so therefore, you cannot make sound unless you're moving air and that your mouth is open and people can actually hear to some extent. I can hum with my mouth closed, but it's not effective. So the bottom line is moving air in and out and speaking and making noise is very good evidence that the airway was not closed.
Now, in terms of, again, prior testimony, did you review or watch the testimony of Dr. Tobin?
I did not watch all of Dr. Tobin's testimony, no.
Okay. Did you hear him discussing the hypopharynx?
I did.
And hypopharynx compression?
Yes.
Have you ever seen anything in the forensic medical literature that a compression of the hypopharynx can cause asphyxia?
I have not.
When you heard his testimony, what steps and efforts did you take to consider that?
Started to do a survey of the available medical literature to ensure that I hadn't missed something. And I could not find...
Objection, Your Honor. Sidebar.
Overruled. Continue.
I could not find anything in the forensic literature talking about pressure applied to the neck causing a hypopharynx.
Objection, Your Honor. Failure to disclose.
Overruled.
And then I went to the standard medical literature, and there are entities which cause impairment of the hypopharynx, but they are usually, well, they all were focused on foreign bodies being inhaled, such as hot dogs or some other object, and then also tumors in that area potentially blocking off that structure. So nothing that really matched the testimony of Dr. Tobin, as I understand it.
Okay. In terms of hypoxia, moving back to that hypoxia, is hypoxia, the signs of hypoxia, is that a progressive or a fast process?
Typically it can be both, but you have to recognize that there is oxygen in your blood that is there, and it takes a while to use up that particular oxygen. So in most circumstances, the onset of hypoxia is gradual. If I restrict somebody's breathing and slow it down by some means or stop it by some means, there is still oxygen dissolved in their blood. You can hold your breath for 30 seconds with comfort. At 45 seconds, you're probably getting a little uncomfortable and you want to breathe. That's your innate reflex trying to override your voluntary suppression of your breathing. But you could probably go out to a minute before you start feeling woozy and or uncomfortable and disoriented, and so that is that's the heart continuing to distribute what you've got in your. And so we see hypoxia occurring gradually in most circumstances over time. It's not something which is an on-off switch and rapid.
And as far as those symptoms that you see or would expect to see in a hypoxic situation, do they gradually progress like that as well?
Typically, yes.
Did you notice hypoxic changes in this particular case?
No. Mr. Floyd was coherent and understandable until shortly before there was a sudden cessation of his movement.
So if Mr. Floyd in this case was progressively suffering from hypoxia, what would you have expected to observe?
I would expect him to become disoriented, confused, incoherent. I would expect some of those symptoms to be at least somewhat apparent.
And you would have, in your review of the videos, would you have expected to see a progression in that hypoxia?
Objection, Your Honor. Ask and answer that statement.
Sorry, understood. Now, how about asphyxia due to position or compression? Let's talk about that. What does that affect?
So there are certain positions a person can get into which impairs your breathing.
And what does that lead to?
It leads to difficulty in moving your diaphragm and your chest, and impairing your ability to reoxygenate your blood.
Can that lead to hypoxia?
Yes.
Which bodily organ would you expect to see affected first?
The brain.
And all of those effects on speech and orientation and things progressing.
Correct.
But you described what you saw as a sudden change. What does that mean to your analysis?
So Mr. Floyd goes from making clear statements, and some of the words I heard were please, and I'm short of breath, please, and then there's a period of about 45 seconds of silence, but he's still moving and seems to be active, and then there's a sudden relaxation. And so he goes from pretty much fully functional and coherent to unconscious very rapidly.
So in this particular case, how does his 90% blockage of the right coronary artery come into play?
So what you're looking at there is a sudden decompensation, which is much more consistent with a sudden cardiac event. And what happens there is the moment the heart stops pumping sufficient blood, there is no circulation of blood. There is no circulation of the blood that still has some oxygen in it. And the brain will function for about 15 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds with full consciousness. After that, the person loses consciousness, but is not instantly dead. People don't suddenly stop breathing when they go unconscious. They will continue to breathe for a period of time, which can be as long as a minute or two, until the respiratory center in your brain shuts down. And at that stage, the person stops breathing.
So in this case, can you just kind of describe the layers of factors that lead you to your conclusion that this was a sudden cardiac event?
Yes. So we have a heart that's vulnerable because it's too big. It demands lots of oxygen. It has very narrow vessels. There are certain drugs that are present in his system that put it at risk of an arrhythmia, the methamphetamine. There is another drug, fentanyl, which slows down your breathing, which will lower the oxygen, potentially saturation in your blood. We've got the carbon monoxide, which has the potential to rob some of that additional oxygen carrying capacity. And then we've got vasoconstriction. So there are multiple entities all acting together and adding to each other and taking away from a different part of the ability to get oxygen into his heart. And so at some point, the heart exhausted its reserves of metabolic supply and went into an arrhythmia and then stopped pumping blood effectively.
Now, just a couple more topics to just cover with you, Doctor. You did review in any death investigation, do you review the role that controlled substances play in death?
Yes.
Do you do that on a regular basis?
It's a very important part of a forensic investigation, and most medical examiner's offices will try to get close to 100% toxicology analysis on their cases if suitable specimens are available.
Now, in terms of the toxicology in this case, how would you characterize the role of fentanyl from the standpoint of forensic pathology? Not toxicology, forensic pathology.
So fentanyl is a powerful narcotic. It's about 80 times more powerful than morphine. And the side effects of fentanyl are slowing down the respiration. So that impairs your ability to breathe as fast as you normally would.
Does that result in decreased oxygen saturation?
It would result in decreased air exchange, which would mean decreasing the oxygen in the bloodstream, but also not fully getting rid of the carbon dioxide, the byproducts of our normal metabolism, so slowly increasing carbon dioxide in his bloodstream.
Now, again, within the context of forensic pathology, what does the presence of norfentanyl mean to you?
Norfentanyl is a byproduct of fentanyl. It's a metabolic byproduct. And so in your liver, or in Mr. Floyd's liver, as the fentanyl passed through the liver, it was broken down into norfentanyl, which is the metabolic byproduct. It's the liver beginning to destroy and metabolize the fentanyl and remove it from the body system.
Now, I'm going to, for the court, I have, there are 3 slides contained within your PowerPoint presentation. I've independently marked them as exhibits 1059, 1060, and 1061. I'd like to show them to the witness. Can you see that, Doctor?
Yes.
Would you agree that this appears to be a screenshot taken from the body-worn camera of Officer Lane at 20:09 and 44 seconds?
Correct.
Looking at the second one, would you agree that this, again, appears to be a body-worn camera image taken at 20:09, 45 seconds?
Yes.
And finally, a third image at 20:09 and 48 seconds.
Yes.
All right. I would offer 2059, 2060, and 2061.
No objection, Your Honor.
And received.
Your Honor, permission to publish 1059. So in this image, Doctor, it's kind of hard to see. What, in your review, did you determine whether there was the possibility that controlled substances were ingested at the time of approach by Officers King and Lane?
Yes.
And what do you see in this image, 1059, that is consistent with that?
In the back corner of Mr. Floyd's mouth, you can see what appears to be a white object.
Let's see if I can. Are you talking this object right there? Oops.
Just slightly higher up than that, yes.
Well, why don't you do it?
Sorry, I covered it with the dot, but that's what I'm referring to.
All right.
You see it just underneath the dot.
Now, in the next image, 1060, what appears to be happening?
In this particular image, it appears that Mr. Floyd is looking away, away from, from Officer Lane.
And looking at the timestamps, that's approximately 1 second later.
Yes.
And in the third image, does he appear to be looking at Officer Lane again?
Yes.
And do you see that same object in his mouth?
I can, yes.
You can. And so, what does this lead you to conclude, or what do you strike at? Oops. We could do this. In terms of the later analysis, there you understand there was some evidence collected from the backseat of Squad 320?
That is my understanding, yes.
And do you know what that substance was?
There was some material there that had saliva and DNA on it that matched Mr. Floyd, and those, I believe, those objects had fentanyl and methamphetamine, if my memory serves me correctly.
So is that what you conclude your analysis on in terms of the ingestion of controlled substances as far as the timing in this case? Both before they were approached as well as during, in the backseat of the squad car?
Yes.
Now, how does the depression of the respiratory rate, we may have covered this, I apologize, how does the depression of the respiratory system, how does that affect the heart specifically?
If the respiratory rate is decreased, the amount of oxygen that is getting into the bloodstream through the lungs is decreased. If I breathe slowly, I'm not able to get as much oxygen into my lungs as if I'm breathing very rapidly. So anything which slows down respiration is going to affect the ability to oxygenate your blood.
And will that also work in concert with the coronary artery issues?
It makes it worse. Again, anything which lowers his oxygen saturation in the blood will act again to restrict oxygen supply to his heart muscles past that blockage.
How about you also understand that methamphetamine was found in the toxicology?
Yes.
And how would you look at the role of methamphetamines from the perspective of a forensic pathologist?
So methamphetamine has three major factors. It can cause arrhythmias, it causes vasoconstriction, and it causes the heart to beat faster. Those are its three major physiological or pharmacological activities. And that would impair, again, an individual in Mr. Floyd's condition with his heart disease and put him at risk.
Now, in terms of, again, the toxicology findings, in the fentanyl, there was the metabolite norfentanyl, correct?
Yes.
What does that tell you in terms of the timing of when Mr. Floyd may have ingested the fentanyl?
It tells you at least some of the fentanyl was taken at some point previous, at some time before, that allowed for enough time for the fentanyl to be absorbed and then pass through the liver and some of it to be broken down. That doesn't happen instantaneously. It can take a period of time.
And methamphetamine, does it have a similar metabolite?
It has a metabolite, yes.
And what is the metabolite?
Amphetamine.
And based on your review of the toxicology in the case, was there amphetamine found?
I did not see any amphetamine in the reports.
What does that suggest to you as a forensic pathologist relevant to the time at which Mr. Floyd would have ingested the methamphetamine.
So that would be consistent with a recent ingestion of methamphetamine.
And in terms of the phase of absorption or elimination, where would that place him?
Well, if there's no evidence of elimination, i.e. metabolism from methamphetamine to amphetamine, it's not in the elimination phase. And given that there appears to be, there's none of that, he's still probably in the absorptive phase. It's consistent with the absorptive phase.
And ultimately, those pills that were found in the back seat of the squad car, you understand that when Mr. Floyd was in the squad car, he was handcuffed.
Objection, reading.
Rephrase. Sustained.
What information did you have about Mr. Floyd's ability to ingest those controlled substances while he was in the squad car?
He had his hands cuffed behind his back from the videos, and those were placed outside when he was taken out of his own vehicle. I did not see any time when those were removed until such time as resuscitation was attempted. So the entire time he had his hands cuffed behind his back. And therefore I cannot think of a plausible way that an individual would be able to get materials into their mouth while restrained in such a format.
Now, the last topic I'd like to discuss with you is the Periganglioma. Did I say that right?
That is close.
All right. Can you just describe what that is?
A Periganglioma. So this is a tumor that was found at the time of autopsy down in Mr. Floyd's lower abdominal area. And these are tumors. And they typically are of two types. One which is has parasympathetic, or is similar to the parasympathetic part of your nervous system, which does not secrete any substances, or certainly vasoactive substances like catecholamine. And then there are the sympathetic ones, which have the ability to secrete. The parasympathetic ones tend to be found up in the head and neck area, and the sympathetic ones tend to be found down in the lower abdominal area. Again, this is where Mr. Floyd's was found.
What's the relevance of finding the Periganglioma in this case?
So these tumors have, at least the ones in the pelvic area, if they are secreting vasoactive substances, catecholamines is the correct term, they will cause an individual potentially to be hypertensive. So that's one of their baseline, if they have a low level of secretion. And the other thing that paragangliomas do is every now and then, without warning, they'll have a sudden surge in secretion, so they're cyclical, which sometimes makes it difficult to diagnose them. You have to do specific testing to diagnose them to get around the cyclical activity.
So just kind of in conclusion, Doctor, did you form ultimately opinions as to the cause and manner of death of Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
And what would those conclusions be?
Mr. Floyd died of a cardiac arrhythmia due to hypertensive atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease during the restraint.
Okay. And were there contributing causes?
Yes.
What are those?
The substances, the fentanyl and the methamphetamine, the potential of a carbon monoxide role, and the potential that the paraganglionoma was adding adrenaline to this whole mixture, making things even worse.
How would you classify the manner of death?
So this is one of those cases where you have so many conflicting different manners. The carbon monoxide would usually be classified as an accident, although somebody was holding him there. So some people would say you could elevate that to a homicide. You've got the drugs on board. In most circumstances, in most jurisdictions, a drug intoxication would be considered to be an accident. He's got significant natural disease, certainly the heart, Periganglioma. You can certainly consider it as a potential exacerbating process, but I wouldn't put it at the top of the list there. So he's got a mixture of that. And then he's in a situation where he's been restrained in a very stressful situation, and that increased his fight and flight type reaction, and that would, during restraint, would be considered a homicide. And you put all of those together, it's very difficult to say which of those is the most accurate. So I would fall back to undetermined
Now, if we
in
can,
this particular case.
if we put your slide regarding the undetermined manner again back up. So essentially this, Doctor, you would agree that this had lots of or many potential contributing causes.
Correct.
And under the definition, the name's definition of an undetermined manner, how does that apply?
So that is what this classification under the name guidelines is really one of the uses of this particular classification, is when you've got so many conflicting different potential mechanisms of death that could lead to so therefore the manner is not clear.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Members of the jury will take our lunch recess. We'll reconvene at 1:30. Council remain for a short time. And Doctor, you may step down.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, be seated. We did have a sidebar regarding one objection by the state regarding certain testimony of this witness, including lack of disclosure. And we had not talked about this earlier. And so I wanted the state to know that in order to meet anything, we have experts who are watching each other's testimony. And this expert testified that he did certain things very close to his testimony. I am allowing the state until tomorrow. I'm not going to make you come up with any rebuttal today. Even if we finish today with the defense case, I would allow the state to consider and call anybody in rebuttal to meet anything, because I assume that Dr. Tobin or others might be listening. And so I would give, and that's why I overruled the objection, is because even if it had been disclosed, I would have allowed it and given the state time to respond, and I will give you overnight so there's not any prejudice to the state if it was not disclosed. That's my reasoning, Your Honor. Or for if you're saying, Your Honor, I really didn't get a chance to look at this report, what are you thinking? That's why. I didn't want you to think it was personal. So, Mr. Blackwell and Mr. Nelson, feel free to talk overnight in case there is a way, if there is rebuttal testimony, if we can somehow make that come in easily.
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, we won't get into that. That's your business, not mine. But I will allow you overnight to prepare any rebuttal.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay, thank you. See you at 1:30.
what's up? Good morning or afternoon, everybody, depending on what time zone you're in. Thanks for tuning in. This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. We're in the midst of day 25 of the Derek Chauvin trial. We're expecting court to come back at about 1:30 Central Time, 55 minutes from now. So we've been hearing this testimony from this David Fowler person, and it's interesting that he developed his professional career in apartheid South Africa. And for our viewers in South Africa, good evening to you all. Dee, one of our members of our collective, is in South Africa right now. So Dee has been helping operate our systems from South Africa on an ongoing basis, including this morning or evening, depending on your location. And I just wanted to mention, Dee had a story about Eskom, which is the large South African power company, and so it's been great to get different info about South Africa from Dee during COVID as well. But South Africa has these energy crises, and South Africa was really, started as a kind of mining concession type of location, and so Eskom is this essentially the result of a long-running thing going way back into colonial apartheid of a centralized power system that was supposed to subsidize the mines. And so that, it's an interesting... So this story is very, what I would call a story about, political economy, or about how the economic structure affects the politics in a country. And there's stuff about the development of nuclear technology in South Africa as well. And so one thing that was pointed out was that Dr. Fowler wasn't actually born in South Africa, according to his LinkedIn. He was actually born in Zimbabwe, in a place called Bulawayo, which was also part of this. The Bulawayo was colonized in 1893 by the British South Africa Company. So if you want to understand the colonial history, it's linked to the town where this testifier was born in Zimbabwe, and that's comes up in the story here. So if you want to understand more about that colonialism process, totally, a side thing, but obviously it's not lost on the fact that this is, a white man from Africa who has that pseudo-British accent going on, certainly an element. So just wanted to mention that really quick. Thank you. But yeah, so that story is up on our website, and then Dee submitted that earlier. So let's see. And then I did mention earlier, because there was obviously big protests last night, Brooklyn Center, after Dante Wright was killed by Kim Potter. So the news that's been brewing, the news that's been brewing here so far is that Kim Potter has been taken into custody by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. The BCA is the state police agency in Minnesota. So Kim Potter is getting charged with second-degree manslaughter by the Washington County Attorney. So that's Washington County. And so just to clarify, because people were confused, what the county attorneys in the metro area agreed was, I guess, to reduce politicization, cases would get swapped around to different counties. And so the job of evaluating to charge Kim Potter fell to Pete Orput, the county attorney of Washington County, which is in the East Metro area, out on 94, Stillwater, Woodbury, Washington County. So I just want to clarify that this is being managed by the Washington County attorney. Has been, in real time, basically been filing second degree manslaughter charges. So we have a press release from the BCA, the Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, was released saying BCA arrests former officer in connection with the death of Dante Wright. Agents with the BCA arrested a former Brooklyn Center police officer for the April 11th shooting death of Dante Wright. Agents took Kim Potter into custody at about 11:30 a.m. at the BCA in St. Paul. After consulting with the Washington County Attorney's Office, Potter will be booked into the Hennepin County Jail on probable second-degree manslaughter. Probable cause second-degree manslaughter. And further charges coming from Washington County Attorney's Office today. It is still an active investigation. I just wanted to back up a second to take note of the fact that the probable cause arrest is actually significant if you look at the sequence of events around George Floyd and how County Attorney Freeman handled that. Because, and I talked to lawyers in the Twin Cities that were like, what is going on? Because County Attorney Freeman had the option to hold Derek Chauvin very quickly on this same charge, to do the same maneuver, to hold a probable cause, second-degree manslaughter, pull him in. And Freeman dragged his feet, and more unrest, riots, etc. happened. So it's very significant, now that the county attorney, Pete Orput, in Washington County is doing a probable cause second-degree manslaughter hold. And I've been watching some tweets while running the broadcast, watching some tweets from Mary Moriarty, who was the former Hennepin County public defender official for a long, long time, and she got pushed out a few months ago. And Moriarty was talking about how while there is a pretty high maximum possible manslaughter sentence, the guideline is actually 48 months. 48 months is the guideline, according to Mary Moriarty, for second-degree manslaughter, and that the last third of that can be under parole or potentially something like house arrest or not in jail. Basically, it would be 48 months is the guideline for that. So I just wanted to mention those developments coming up that are happening this morning. And so we're gonna, we'll update Twitter on that as well. And I do just want to especially thank my colleague Alex for cranking out tons of tweets. We certainly know that obviously there's a lot of traumatic content here. It's painful to be going over these frames and details, and to especially the audio of Mr. Floyd being killed by Derek Chauvin in this trial. So the tweets, as a way to kind of look at the text, still images, we're trying to give people a way to keep up on this story without being exposed to what can be called vicarious trauma, which can cause sleep difficulty, stress, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, etc. Vicarious trauma is very real and a serious risk of this content. So I just taking a moment for that. We try to throw the content warnings on there. We are paying heed to this and taking it seriously. So just wanted to mention that. Yes, and so for the Kim Potter second-degree manslaughter, 48 months is the guideline. That isn't the maximum, but my understanding for Mary Moriarty is that is the guideline. So I just wanted to mention that really quickly. So besides that, one moment, please. Again, one thing that I'm sure we'll be hearing about, since Kim Potter was in the Brooklyn Center Police for a long time, there's always a question of the training doctrines, and she was around long enough to have been exposed to bulletproof warrior training, which was agreed to by the Post Board, which regulates the police training in the Twin Cities, in all of Minnesota. The Post Board allowed bulletproof warrior training, which encourages more, gunfire on people in police encounters. Basically, it just sort of exaggerates the circumstances under which police should use gunfire, and it directly leads to more gunfire from police. And in the aftermath of Geronimo Yanez killing Philando Castile out on Larpenteur Avenue a few years back, this bulletproof warrior training stuff really got carefully looked at. Again, we sort of looked at a lot of this stuff earlier, and how when these individual officers do these things, roll back the clock, look at the training they were exposed to. So we covered this a lot in 2018. And if you want to learn about a public forum focused on flawed police education, again, 2018, when we were really diving deeply into this subject. So I just, so the Post Board, the way that the state legislature manages the situation, it is all very central to what happens. It's not just about the individual officers. We're trying to back it out to the systemic level, taking a look at that. So let's see. One moment, please. Again, on the political equation, we heard, it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before. So on Monday, there was a press conference, and the Governor Walz said a lot of stuff, including making excuses for all these chemical munitions. He doesn't seem to acknowledge that there's serious health effects from the chemical munitions and things like that. But it is valid what he pointed out, that the state legislature, namely the Senate, as we've heard from other people, including Jonathan McClellan from the Justice Coalition, the Minnesota State Senate has been holding back reforms on police, and so Walz pointed the finger at this politician, Paul Gazelka. And what I talked about a few days ago was Paul Gazelka made it into the Senate in 2010 in a primary campaign that was essentially a homophobic primary campaign directed against former Senator Paul Coring, who was a closeted gay man in the Minnesota Senate in the Republican caucus. And Gazelka approached that from a right-wing perspective. It is listed on it, not just his Wikipedia page, but plenty of other places, that he seems to have even put one of his own children through gay conversion therapy. So he even subjected one of his family members to Michelle Bachmann's husband, who has done gay conversion therapy to try to train people to not be gay. Gazelka apparently put his own family member into that and ran this Senate campaign in 2010 to defeat Paul Coring. Coring was basically forced out of the closet because it was an open secret down at the Capitol, including when I was a reporter there. It was known that Coring was a closeted gay senator, and they basically forced him out of the closet because he wasn't going to vote to ban gay marriage. And then Gazelka, worked the local politics to get in. And so I think there's an argument to be said that Gazelka's primary, altered the tenor and the tone of the Minnesota Senate Republican caucus, which in my 4 years as a reporter at the state capitol back in the day, I had a pretty good sense of the Republican caucus, and Gazelka is more of a hardliner than I think a lot of those were, and the leadership was back then. And so anyway, after that's just a little background going back, 10, 11 years here. I just wanted to give that context about this guy because he is basically the most powerful Republican official in the state. He's a key part of this equation. We've seen, obviously, a lot of political instability going back through last summer. And I'm not saying that Wikipedia is the canonical source on this. This just happens to have a lot of information about him. There aren't that many web pages about him. But I wanted to back that up and sort of say what are the political actors and what is happening with legislation. Again, we talked to Jonathan McClellan. I'll play this really quick.
The unions, they've had unfettered access to our politicians for years.
So I'll freeze it again, but you've seen that interview run before. McClellan laid out how the level of the Senate on this whole thing. And so after Walz made these remarks, dropping this on the doorstep of the Minnesota Senate, Gazelka had to give a pretty defensive interview, I guess, I think the following day. So I think that was probably on Tuesday. And, saying, okay, well, we made some reforms, and yes, we'll hold hearings and blah, 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 but there's really no firm commitments there, right? There's legislative deadlines. There were reforms passed by the Minnesota House, which is controlled by the Democrats, and the Senate bottled up those reforms. And so legislative politics is something people should pay close interest to, but when the legislators don't engage the stakeholders around the state on the different sides, then civil disorder, uprisings, unrest, tension obviously are going to increase. So that's a level of the politics here which is worth spending time on because it's part of the warp core reactor under all of this political tension. And we have to look at that and analyze the factors feeding in there. So I just have to kind of lay that out because I do think it's pretty important to the backdrop. Moving on, likewise, the media environment in the Twin Cities is important. There isn't necessarily a lot of media criticism available. Media organizations been under pressure, especially because of COVID and everything. And so we did catch this story on Jake Holes. I worked on this story with Nico and our contributor, Sam Richards. about how Jay Coles made false allegations after the raids on the U.S. Capitol that leftists were involved. He floated those out on KSTP Channel 5, where he's a long time been a reporter. David Brower, who's been a reporter a long time in the Twin Cities, pointed out, and we have it linked here in the story, that Jay Coles is well known to be someone that you take pro-police narratives to. And earlier, if the younger folks may not be aware of this, but Jay Coles basically invented a thing called Pointergate, which was made up by police officials, police union officials, I believe Delmonico, people from the time around when Betsy Hodges was mayor. They said Betsy Hodges, former mayor, pointing at someone who, had been through the criminal justice system and was going door to door to register voters to vote, that literally pointing at this person was a gang sign. And so he floated the Pointergate gang sign, and everyone from CNN on down made fun of how bad this reporting was. If you want to see a clip of the Pointergate, it is linked in there if you follow the CNN link, because CNN was shocked, and they're not, obviously there's plenty of criticism about CNN, but their points were valid, that this was really, really bad reporting, and KSTP doubled down, tripled down on the story, and Columbia Journalism Review said, wow, they are tripling down on this, and so they were determined to say Pointergate is for real. So that happened earlier, and then later, years later, Coles says leftists attacked the Capitol. KSTP had to retract that, and then in the middle, what I caught was that Coles went on the Garage Logic podcast to basically demonize activists at George Floyd Square. And so in this story, what we break down is Coles talking about how police officers are using draft police reports in their computers. So these are draft reports, not final reports, in the computers of the police system to trade notes about people, and they were giving Coles access to those, and Coles to serve the joint goals of Coles and the police officers to discredit people in George Floyd Square. And Coles explained this to Joe Souchere on the Garage Logic podcast, all of which is published by Hubbard Broadcasting, KSTP. Stanley Hubbard is one of the most powerful and rich Republicans in Minnesota, absolutely a keystone figure in the constellation. So this is an example of the demonization of social movements and Jay Coles carrying water for nonsensical police stuff and working closely with police using draft police reports inside the MPD system. So what I'm saying about the Capitol riot thing was Jay Coles made false claims that leftists attacked the U.S. Capitol. He took that, put it on KSTP, and it got retracted. It is detailed in the story. You can take a look there. So again, that's another piece of the equation. How does the corporate media discredit social movements? This is our little case study with sort of an Andy Warhol homage on the cover image. Just wanted to go into that because, again, it's another piece of this equation, using misinfo to go at social movements. With all of the police tactics, separate subject, we've been looking at the field force, and this Operation Safety Net press conferences, they've talked about using field force tactics. So this is a 2016 story. We keep referring back to it because it explains the bulk of what you see with police tactics, not just in the Twin Cities, but all over the United States. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, Center for Domestic Preparedness, has a curriculum called Field Force Operations. We got the PDF. It's in this document. You can read the whole thing yourself. It's right there. And if you read through that, you will understand the flashbangs, the OC, the 40 millimeter marker sponge rounds that hit our reporter Nico last night. He has an injured leg today from a police attack when they clearly knew he was with these other journalists, but they tried to, they hit him in the leg last night, and he's recovering, but he was definitely injured. So the field force technology or doctrine is mobile cavalry kind of style, multi-jurisdictions. So very helpful for decoding how these things work. So that's, we try to roll it back. We try to look at the training. We try to roll it back. There's been more aviation, more police action in aviation, as we expected in this whole process. We had a story from Sam Richards that, our contributor, I ran the video earlier today showing how the Minneapolis State Patrol plane N115SP has a very, very advanced high zoom that can reach down, essentially thousands of yards, detect infrared, and orbit around protests and things, usually based out of the St. Paul airport. So keep an eye on the St. Paul airport if you are into flight watching. So Sam did that story for us. Sam did another story for us about the munitions supply chain, and how the Department of Natural Resources ran to Colorado to do supply chain stuff, and so that story again kind of breaks down to how the DNR gets aircraft supposedly for forestry, but they're actually just running around all the way to Colorado to go to an airport directly to pick up chemical munitions to then drop back to St. Paul directly. So we have that story there, again, thanks to contributor Sam Richards. I'll just go back to a little bit of an earlier coverage. We have a series from another contributor, Mirjan Sadar, has been breaking down a lot of stuff about what he calls the 21st century Jim Crow in the North Star City and the Downtown Dark Alliance. And that's how the Target Corporation, in particular the Target Corporation, helped build a huge surveillance system in downtown Minneapolis, built up public-private partnerships during the Ryback administration with the connivance of the Downtown Council, which is, if people follow Minneapolis politics, Kramer, Downtown Council, are representing landlord interests, very wealth-centric worldview in terms of Minneapolis city politics. And so if you want to understand where the DT 100, the Downtown 100 prosecutions came from, how Target was paying prosecutors to work in Amy Klobuchar's office when she was the county prosecutor, to do more prosecutions, things that wouldn't normally be prosecuted, that this story breaks down. It's a big story, but it riffs through a lot of this material, because again, we're trying to bring back the last 10, 15, 20 years, since 9/11, how the modern policing environment got shaped in the Twin Cities and different parts of that. So that I just wanted to kind of circle around, check a bunch of these things. Also, our contributor Sam Richards, if you check out this story, you can learn how to find your own FBI spy planes by using telemetry, using electronic intelligence. You can detect FBI spy planes. Sam tells you how in this story. Thank you, contributor Sam. So, and then, so the Chauvin trial landing page. Okay, let's cover the Fowler stuff. So we're in the midst of Fowler, and David Fowler, this person was born in Zimbabwe, trained in South Africa, was the chief medical examiner in Maryland for a time, is no longer. So again, we are on lunch break. We're at 32 minutes left for lunch break. So Fowler, I'll just run through this quick, then we'll go back to videos. Appreciate your support, and thanks for your interest in all this as we're waiting around for things to come back. So David Fowler, there's allegations right now. There's a lawsuit. The ACLU and a family have filed a lawsuit that David Fowler was closely involved in the cover-up of a custody death of one Anton Black, and Fowler finalized that autopsy and is now a defendant in this case that the ACLU filed in Maryland. And it took 4 months for the autopsy to be released. Governor Hogan had to intervene to get that released. And he blamed a sudden cardiac death with bipolar disorder being a significant contributing condition with no evidence of asphyxia. Sounds pretty familiar. He just seems to keep finding that people have heart attacks during police encounters repeatedly without any reference to any medical effects being generated by the police. They're held harmless from from such rationales. In his role as medical examiner, you're seeing that basically you're saying the same package today. So we have links inside the trial page back to a story by WTOP, which goes into the quick detail on it. And then The Intercept had a story on April 4th saying Chauvin defense witness faces lawsuit of his own death over a black teenager in police custody. And then there's another one named Tyrone West, who died in questionable circumstances in 2013. And according to this, on therealnews.com, the Maryland medical examiner David Fowler ruled West died to a heart condition known as cardiac arrhythmia. And then the state's attorney declined to charge any of the officers. So that was the Tyrone West case in 2013 that Mr. Fowler signed off on, another cardiac quote-unquote argument. So Tyrone West and Anton Black in 2018, who was the 19-year-old from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So those are some of the things that have been talked about with David Fowler. We wanted to get that on the table. So obviously he's being paid for this case, and people knew coming in earlier that this was a known issue with this guy, and that even though he's under a lawsuit, this was the person that the defense would go to. And you know, one of the commenters said, "Oh, he's Eric Nelson is grasping for tailpipes," which I thought was a funny phrase to highlight. One moment, please. Okay, so I just, I wanted to back that out. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a tangent. Again, there's a lot of different things in play: the political tension, the policing practices in the Twin Cities, the weird aviation, the history of the surveillance networks. Earlier, our member Georgia Fort had a good story about the jury questionnaire. Feels like a long time ago when that stuff was being addressed. And then, from back in 2018, we have the Bulletproof Warrior stuff that we've tried to analyze. Another thing that came up, one of our former members wrote a story about the use of sock puppets by the Strategic Information Center in Minneapolis. Through FOIAs, we were able to catch that Lieutenant Rugal, who used to run the Strategic Information Center, was involved in essentially creating fake activist social media accounts to spy on social movements, to spy on Occupy protests and stuff like that. So that was a story that we did back in 2019. Again, the Mobile Field Force, you can go through this manual and basically cite chapter and verse for all these different police tactics that we regularly see. And we are going to keep continuing to watch what's developing with the Dante Wright coverage. We were out there again last night. That continues to happen. So it's a lot of stuff to contemplate, a lot of things to grapple with. So we're going to be waiting for 27 minutes for them to come back to lunch. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this for about 15 minutes. And then we're going to go down. We're going to start new feeds for the afternoon. And we will start a new feed on Facebook just to kind of split it up. I won't go into it too much, but it's been difficult when we try to publish this stuff to have really strange automated algorithms like fake copyright claims on us and stuff like that. It's a serious algorithmic copyright stuff has been a serious problem. I'll leave it at that for now, but it's serious. So we're just trying to produce video. Everything that we're filming this is all public domain footage from inside court. This is being published to everyone. And when we go out filming in a protest and people have music on a megaphone or a PA system, that is clearly legally fair use in U.S. copyright law. It is obviously fair use, but algorithmic copyright enforcement is a very serious problem affecting journalism today, and it's getting worse. I'll leave it at that. So thank you all for joining us. I know that was a lot of info. I do appreciate everyone working with it, going through the pieces here. There's a lot of pieces to kind of tie together, get a holistic, rounded view of the tension here. But we appreciate your support. I myself will also try to take a good break. So we're gonna run a little more from the streams on Monday night. and then we're going to go down, and then we're going to come back. So we appreciate everything, and it's been great to have respectful chats. Just keep respectful in the chats. We're working through the trial, and who knows, right? Okay, I will summarize again. Earlier in the week, Judge Cahill said closing arguments could happen next Monday, and possibly even sooner. It could be. And he said that stuff could be raised about Fowler potentially overnight tomorrow. That's what he was saying. What tomorrow they could talk about Fowler. The state could raise questions about Fowler. And so, but earlier in the week, Judge Cahill said he didn't want closing arguments to happen on Friday. He wanted the jurors to be able to rest over the weekend and then come back on Monday, do closing arguments, go into sequestration, evaluate the facts. The jurors are supposed to look at questions of fact, not questions of law. There will be statements to the jury about essentially what they're supposed to evaluate in terms of which facts about, to generate each of these charges. Second-degree manslaughter, which Kim Potter is now going up on as we speak, in Brooklyn Center, the Brooklyn Center former police officer. Also Derek Chauvin, I believe, has second-degree manslaughter and 2 murder charges, so that is also going to get considered. Whew. So, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, I'm Dan, producer at Unicorn Riot. We have support with Nico and Chris and particularly Dee helping out this morning. Dee checking in from South Africa, and Alex has been rocking the tweets, again, cranking out that written material so people can follow on Twitter. So, thank you all for joining us. We will, again, be going down and coming back within about 15 minutes. Thank you.
The grenade balls with tear gas in them, I don't know the specific name. They're shooting 40 millimeter marker rounds. People have sort of built a barricade in the street up here. All right, thank you. You can see the barricade. And the police are trying to move everybody out of this area. And right now they're making arrests back there in the distance. There's a lot of police officers up on these streets. They're on various avenues up the block.
If you want to protect people, you need to go behind the line. They are going to get shoved and fucking shot without you.
It's very hard to see, but there's somebody getting arrested there. I don't know, hopefully you all can see it a little better. I cannot barely see it. Just a water bottle. Again, the police have already shot just tons of munitions at people. And people are responding with water bottles and milk. People are mocking the officers. Again, people are just out here looking for justice for Dante Wright. The body cam footage was released today. It showed the police officer shooting him with the gun when she thought it was a taser, evidently. They called it an accidental discharge, therefore an accidental death somehow. She is still getting paid. She's on paid administrative leave. She has not been fired. I think the city manager has been fired. People have been very peaceful from what I've seen. They're going after 2 youth right there. Somebody just helped them. Somebody just helped them. Somebody just helped them. Got them out. Wow. That was amazing. That was quite amazing. They literally grabbed 2 youth, 1 white dude, big tall, snatched them, grabbed them out of the police's grasp, and got them away. Wow. One of the best de-arrests I've ever seen. Or the most, I shouldn't say the best, the most fruitful de-arrests. Looks like the police are going to make another move in a minute. They got the shooters on the sides. With the flashlights, there's usually the shooters. Here's the line, the barricade line. Wow, the captain is out here trying to snatch people. He just got denied again. They're gonna go after this dude. Oh, they just sprayed him, they pepper sprayed them. State troopers just pepper spray people. Oh, this dude falling because of the curb. People asking for medic. Again, they're pepper spraying people on the front line. Here's the barricade. We'll see how they treat the barricade. People have moved some of the barricade back.
Our hands are up. What else do we gotta do? Hold on. We don't got no sticks. We don't got no pepper spray. Hold on. Let's get our hands up. That's it. This is our First Amendment rights. Our First Amendment rights. Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
We have another standoff. Neighborhood reporters out here doing their thing. Frontlining it again. You want to talk at all?
Well, yeah, we can talk. I can talk.
You can just stand here and
yeah.
maybe not be in that way because I don't want you to get hurt.
Yeah.
So stand here, and just watch them with me, and then talk. What's your feeling out here?
Well, I mean, we're seeing what we always see: the police escalating things. They're throwing tear gas. They're chopping the protest up. You know, same thing that we see all the fucking time. Same shit, different day.
So
I will say, at this point, I've been over like 400 protests in like the last like 10, 11 months. I've never been tear gassed this much in one day. So I will say that's quite the achievement. So
how are you feeling right now? You said you've been to all these protests. Right now we have another death of another young man, supposedly from an accidental discharge. What's your feeling on Dante Wright?
Oh, I think we need to get, justice for Dante White, and we need to stop going up and lying to people in the middle of trials and saying that their job isn't to lynch us, because that's what their job is to do, is to make sure that they lynch us. And so we need to make sure that we do everything in our power to keep them held accountable, because this is just absolutely ridiculous. Since George Floyd has been killed, we've had Dela Eid also, right? We had them still putting their knees on people's neck during park evictions. So nothing's changed, even though they want to go into trial and say that they're doing good and that they've changed stuff. Nothing's changed. These monsters in human clothing can't even pretend like they're not animals for 2 fucking months. It's a 2-month trial, and they can't even pretend like they don't kill us for game for 2 months. So that's what I got to say about that. I'm mad. I'm angry. I woke up crying all morning. I barely ate anything. I had to force myself to eat. My body, I feel stress going through my body everywhere. It's just like I can physically feel, like, in my body how unsafe I am in America. And it's causing a physical toll on my body.
You want a burrito?
Huh?
You want a burrito? You can't eat?
I can't eat. Like, I just can't. I've tried to eat. But thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, man. Appreciate that. Anything else you'd want to say?
Yep. So this is why we need actual systemic change. We actually need those those bills passed by the families, and we need to get, community control of the police too. And we need them because we need to find some type of agreement that they're going to stop killing us. And see, the thing is, a lot of people keep saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. But, like, we're not asking for perfection, right? We're asking for the bare minimum. We're asking so that they, that the families can see the body cam footage of the people of the loved ones that they've killed. We're asking for them to not have immunity to just kill us. Like, we're asking for very reasonable things. And the thing is, even once we get that and we get CPAC, like, we still got so much more to do. We got to fix academics on the academic system and make it not just a way that they can maintain generational wealth. We need to go to the doctors and make it a safer place for black and brown bodies. We need to stop the prison, prison industrial complex. We have so much fucking shit to do. And this is just the start. So, yeah, this is complete bullshit. And you see that they're going to do everything in their power to maintain control, right? Because the thing is, instead of giving us a law, instead of, charging these cops and stuff like that, what they decide that they're going to do is that they're going to push us back. They're going to mace people. They're going to shoot rays of sound in their ears. They're going to do everything to escalate, push them in here, and then say that they looted and all this stuff. And they don't care about that. They don't care about the buildings. They don't care about any of this shit. What they care about is maintaining power. And that's what they're going to do. And you see that with their actions. They're like, you can do whatever you want to the neighborhood. We're not changing those fucking laws. And that's why we need to make sure we get systemic change. Thank you, Nico.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Last little spotlight. Thank you. Appreciate the time. Yep. Be safe out here.
Thank you, Nico. Love you.
I'll be back. The police are adding reinforcements to their line in front of the apartment complex. You can check out our Twitter feed. I think we probably have some information on there. Still a few hundred people here, as well as officers on the line trying to make an arrest now, snatching somebody. Did they get anybody? I don't think they got anybody again. Another time of not getting anybody. Some of them are getting out of line, moving too forward too fast. Some of them are having to catch up. Looks like they're trying to come back and then snatch more. They just came, the captain is coming up. He just snatched a young woman, very young, just snatched her and pulled her back into their crowd. I think they just snatched one of them. One of them just got grabbed back there. Person was like, where'd they go? That was one of my friends. And so here's another thing. You wonder why it's so dark out here. They shut off all the lights. They made it a point to shut off all the lights that are on this street. People were asked about that. I think the police chief and the mayor might have been asked about that at a press conference. So again, now the police are just picking people off at random, maybe not at random, but when they want to. They're breaching the line that they have, and they're sending 3 or 4 officers up, usually 3, to try to snatch people. Here's 2 people who haven't been snatched, seems like the police have been trying to snatch.
Hands up! 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 Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
They just pepper sprayed more people. Police just grabbed somebody again. Very violent arrests. Damn, they just shot a dude right next to me. Sorry if I'm off on some of these movements of the camera. My camera is glitching right now. The weather and whatever else has made the screen upside down. So apologies. Doing the best I can. They're pointing the guns at this person in the car. I'm not sure why.